Monica Wilbur, and then followed by Representative Philip K. Lyman.
Thank you, Chair Moss. 2 years ago, I stood here in front of the board and read a reprimand of the board's unlawful and unconstitutional attempt to silence member Natalie Cline. And here we go again. You are doing it all over again. You are not learning from the mistakes of the past. And maybe it's because it was Natalie who had to pay for your mistakes and not you. But that needs to change. If what the media says is true, at least 6, if not more, board members approached Chair Moss and demanded that some type of punishment for Natalie Cline be had for exercising her free speech. The news report said one member in particular requested that Natalie Cline be punished by losing her committee assignment. You all took an oath to support, obey, and defend the Constitution. Anyone on this board who is in on that complaint in any form or fashion is acting unconstitutionally. It is unconstitutional for you to seek to silence Natalie's voice to represent her district and freely speak the truth. The Constitution doesn't say that the right to free speech belongs to everyone but Natalie Cline. The Constitution doesn't say that the only speech that gets protected is the speech that you agree with. The Constitution doesn't say punish Natalie's speech but protect other members' speech, and you know whose speech you are protecting. The Constitution does say you cannot abridge Natalie's speech, and you cannot compel it either. You are not the speech police. It doesn't take a lawyer to tell you that your bylaws do not trump the Constitution. If you have acted in any way to support silencing Natalie, you have both an ethical and constitutional obligation to recuse yourselves from any vote on allegations against Natalie. You don't get to be her accusers and her jury and her judge. That is a gross abuse of power and of due process. Under no circumstances should any complaining member be allowed to participate in any vote concerning Natalie Cline. May God bless our constitutional republic, and may God bless Natalie Cline.
Thank you, Monica.
Let's see, Monica Wilbur.
Thank you. On July 11th, 7 members of the State Board met with Chair Jim Moss. It was reported that these members met with Chair Moss to demand that member Natalie Cline be reprimanded again, this time for speaking out against the sexualization of children by our schools. One of these board members, Sarah Reale, then emailed board leadership members Moss, Hart, and Earl a complaint about Natalie because, as Reale wrote in her email, Chair Moss asked us to reach out with any evidence we have. Sarah Reale went on to produce multiple pages and leaks of evidence that wouldn't even fool Scooby-Doo. Then either Reale or another member with knowledge of the complaint email and the secret meeting leaked this information plus the details of board leadership's supposedly confidential investigation of Cline to KSL. These 7 board members, including Sarah Reale, acted as Cline's accusers. These 7 board members, including Sarah Reale, then proceeded to take part in not 1 but 2 closed executive session meetings in which they discussed what kind of punishment the board should dish out to member Cline. These 7 board members, including Sarah Reale, acted as Cline's jurors. Finally, these 7 board members, including Sarah Reale, acted as Cline's judge by taking action to sign an unofficial pseudo-reprimand of Natalie Cline that was released only to Cline. That is, until member Brent Strait leaked the letter, apropos of nothing, to 2 people who had written Brent Strait and Leanne Wood to ask why they were leaking the details of the closed session through a letter to constituents. So what we have are state board members who are leakier than a dollar store diaper, and they think they can act as accuser, jury, and judge, all out of the highly ironic pretense that they are protecting the good name of the board. Finally, I have one question for those members who secretly accused Natalie Cline. Why are you still hiding who you are? Both Natalie and the public have the right to know the part you played in this embarrassing and gross abuse of your power as elected officials. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica.
Monica Wilbur.
Good morning, Board. I am here today with some facts about the Board's proper role as representatives and in exercising my constitutional right to free speech. I expect that that right will be respected, and even if you don't like the sound of what I'm going to say, I expect that you will uphold your oath of office to defend the Constitution and defend my right and responsibility to say it. I'm responding to Chair Moss's questionable claim from last board meeting that my comments last month were an attack on him. Chair Moss, the fact was initially reported by KSL that you held a meeting with member Sarah Reale and 7 other unnamed board members who demanded that the board reprimand member Cline. You said it was only 6, but at this point, why should anyone trust a word you say? You give lots of lip service to transparency, but somehow being transparent doesn't apply to the roles other board members played in trying to defame member Cline's reputation, especially Sarah Reale's role. Chair Moss, why are you still protecting the identities of Natalie Cline's accusers on the board? And why did you, along with Vice Chairs Hart and Earle, allow Natalie's accusers to act as judges of her character in executive session meetings? Why didn't you require them to recuse themselves? Or better yet, why didn't board leadership recuse itself in deliberating on Cline's punishment by issuing your derogatory press release on Natalie Cline in the middle of what should have been a confidential investigation, and knowing that what you wrote wasn't even substantiated by the results of the USBE's internal audit analysis? Did you really consider yourselves qualified to be impartial judges in this kangaroo court? Another fact is that this board leadership has received ethics complaints about members Reale, Lear, Strait, and Wood. But yet somehow nobody at the USBE has leaked any details of these complaints to the media. Somehow the public is totally unaware if any investigations of these members are taking place at all. So strange, isn't it? After all, the USBE sprung more leaks than the Titanic when it came to releasing details on Cline's investigation to the media and the public. The double standards on display at the USBE are absurd, unprofessional, and unbecoming of the entity that oversees public education for our children and my children. These are not attacks, they are just hard facts. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Monica Wilbur.
Thank you. Okay. Good morning, Board. In addition to reconsidering the recent unlawful amendment to R277700, this Board today will also be looking at some major amendments to its R277114 rule, which redefines the USBE's oversight of education programs. These recent rule amendments paint a picture for the public that shows how this Board is increasingly and alarmingly governing inappropriately, illegally, or both. The 114 amendment uses a lot of words that give the USBE staff and board leadership cover to act unilaterally, subjectively, and non-transparently when it comes to enforcement of the law. And the newly amended 700 rule puts 53G 10205, a law backed by no fewer than 3 constitutional guarantees, at the mercy of another piece of code that would make it virtually impossible for students and parents to realize their lawful constitutional rights. The board had zero authority to make this amendment. I've heard members of this board cheerlead for local control when that level of control suits their agenda, and then turn around and push control of the locals when they think the law goes too far, as some board members say 53G 10205 does, because it protects kids from having to compromise their religious beliefs and consciences to receive a public education. I've also seen board members hand out goodie bags celebrating the Constitution and then turn around to punish board member Cline for her constitutionally protected free speech. These double standards are wrong. James 1:8 warns of double-minded men being unstable, and a double-minded board is just as unstable. The USBE has no right to break the law, no authority to bypass the Constitution, and certainly has no business cherry-picking how the law gets enforced and who they enforce it on. Please keep this in mind today as you vote on these very important rule amendments and other business. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Monica. Okay. Monica Wilbur.
On November 27th, I listened to testimonies of political exiles who fled to the USA to escape their socialist and communist home countries. Janicet Rivero, a keynote speaker,
that the United States is a country founded on the value of freedom. Other speakers expressed repeatedly how the first act dictators took in their countries was to silence those who criticized their regimes. On November 3rd, I witnessed Chair Jim Moss cut the microphone of April Despain as she expressed her concerns with her board member, Sarah Reale. Chair Moss justified this by saying he wanted to protect board members from, quote, personal attacks, and insisted that Mrs. Despain had the right to only, quote, criticize policy. Our constitutional protection of free speech is being brutally violated if the state can shut down free speech that criticizes the state. By silencing Mrs. Despain's speech because she criticized Member Reale for her proven attempts to punish Member Cline for her free speech, it appears that Chair Moss engaged in unconstitutional viewpoint discrimination. Legal counsel from the New York State school attorney says, quote, generally, courts have held that content restrictions on speech at school board meetings are impermissible, particularly if only certain views are regulated. In other words, a board's policy and practices regarding public speech must be content neutral and not restrict speech based on a particular viewpoint. For instance, if the board president permits speakers to praise a given teacher, but suppresses a speaker who criticizes the same teacher, a court could view that as being not content neutral. Board presidents should be very cautious about preventing individuals from speaking, even if they think the speech sounds slanderous, constitutes fighting words, or otherwise is an unprotected form of speech, end quote. As one who gives regular comment at board meetings, I want this information on the public record today. It sounds like this board owes more than a few people a couple of apologies. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica.